The game is that if I scrape the tip, it's easier to play, but it gets a little bit flat. And then I clip the tip and it gets stiff. And then I scrape it again, it gets flat. And then I clip the tip and it gets stiff. I go into that game.
Yes.
Diminishing each time what I do, to the point that at the moment, literally at the very end, it will be just 2 tiny scrapes. Blip, blip, and it's done. And then I put it away. I'm not going to play on it. But I need it to be that wonderful in that I blow on it, and for me, it is a perfect reed. But I know there are people who refine it even beyond that, so that the reed is the item itself. All you have to do is blow on it, and bingo, there you have it. I don't have that. I don't want that.
That is absolutely fascinating. The discussion about cane and the fibers and using a microscope. We really got into the weeds with that. Or should I say we got into the reeds with that discussion. I know we have a microscope down in our basement. I'm going to run down after this interview and go grab it. We'll run to my biology department and have my reeds evaluated. That's fantastic. Thank you, Alex, for that just thorough conversation about cane.
It is really enlightening, should I say, because I could see a few other things when the fibers get cut, get destroyed on an older reed, or if a reed that I play, say, modern music, or that I have to play multiphonics, and when I play Barrio Sequenza, my reed lasts one run through. So I can't play my dress rehearsal on the same reed that I'm going to play the performance, because the reed will be gone. By the time I do all of those effects and all of those dynamics, the reed is destroyed. It takes 7 minutes, it's done. And then I look in the microscope, why? The fibers are all destroyed. And then something else, what happens to older reeds? We, as much as we brush our teeth and take care of our oral health, saliva itself is an organic compound. And when it dries, it calcifies around the darn fibers. And we can see those in the microscope, that there are some kind of rocky deposits surrounding the fibers as the reed gets older, right? And that, of course, prevents not only the fibers from carrying through our vibrations, but all the cellulose that are around there as well. So what do I do with that? Every 3 hours of playing or so, I use warm to hot water to clean the house using my digitals, now in my fingers, and then, of course, blowing fast water through the inside of the reed to get rid of that calcification. Once the reed gets into hot water, it will expand. The fibers will expand. And that tends to crack away most of those calcifications and wash them away. And I feel like I then give another few hours of life to that reed. This is also something I learned from looking at the microscope.
That's very, very interesting. So just to clarify, when do you start using warm water through your reeds? Is it after every practice, or is it just as the reed gets older?
No, after every practice might be overkill. I guess we could do that. It would probably be the proper thing to do before the reed dries out and before any of that organic compound in saliva dries out. But it just gets a little bit annoying for me to have to run to the bathroom after every practice, because I stop a little bit, I'll teach a lesson, then I go back to practicing. I'm going to be washing my reed 5 times a day. So I usually do it after about 2-3 hours of playing, of practicing, whether that happens in 1 day or 2 days, whatever. And then on the same line of thinking, I hardly ever use the same reed for an entire orchestra rehearsal. Usually I use 3 or 4 reeds. I use them a little bit, put them away. and then play another one. Also, not only because I don't want to kill a reed in a rehearsal, but I don't want to get used to only one reed, right? Mm-hmm. We know how we can always have the bad habit, or we just can only play on one reed, then we play on the next one, we can't make the same sound. Yeah, because we rely too much on the reed, and then that's not right.
And do you have any favorite reed tests that you like to do before you put the reed in the oboe?
Well, let's see. That is my sharp C. Because of my wide shape, I do not seek an octave.
So you compensate for the wider shape by not having that rattly low C come into your crow. Then you get
Correct.
the stability you need.
On the wide shape, that rattly low C is dangerous.
Yeah.
It is sign of a droopy reed.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it doesn't work.
And you're also playing some Baroque oboe and classical oboe, so talk about a wide reed. Those instruments both use much wider reeds than the modern oboe.
It's fortunate that, the Baroque oboe reed, there are two kinds of staples. You can have an entire staple, which is huge, or you can have just a little stump that you leave in the instrument. And on top of that, you put a bass oboe reed. So I can have the same reed, the same actual reed for bass oboe and Baroque oboe. They work fine. The only thing I need to adjust is that little stump that goes into the Baroque oboe, and I'm home free.
Wow, thank you for that tip. I'm playing some Baroque oboe myself, and I'll just order some bass oboe reeds now. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, there would have to be, the bass oboe is, of course, massive and needs a lot of sound. So often I found that my bass oboe reeds will be a bit too big for the Baroque oboe. But the softer ones, the softer bass oboe reeds work like a glove for the Baroque. Classical, no. Mm-hmm. Classical oboe reeds, I made them separately.
To say you've had an incredibly varied career is an understatement. You've recorded 25 CDs, one of which was a Grammy Award-winning Strauss Oboe Concerto with Barenboim and the Chicago Symphony. You perform solo recitals, chamber recitals, and of course you're the principal oboist of the Calgary Symphony. I was wondering if you could talk to us about some of your performances, your recording projects, and any particular reed challenges that any of those might have presented.
Well, now, when I was still studying with James Caldwell, he mentioned to me, that proverb, "May you have an interesting life," and that I was destined to one of those. There have been many ups and there have been many downs, right? So it's sometimes misleading when we read a biography. And of course, we only put the goodies in the biography. We don't put all of the bad stuff that happens.
Right.
But there were many competitions that I didn't win. There were auditions I didn't win. And of course, there's focal dystonia. And through all of that, I just love working with music. Mm-hmm. And as it affects the reeds, I cannot be a slave to reeds because they would limit what I can do. And that again goes with the philosophy of not aiming for the perfect reed, only for a reed that plays well for us. And any given day, I will be playing Bach, and I'll be playing Barrett with my students in lessons, or I'll be playing Haydn concerto with a student in lessons, and I'm hoping to add to my pandemic practicing the 5 pieces by Antal Dorati. Each one of them requires a different kind of reed. So I need that flexibility. And I need I love the fact that we can change reeds so easily. If I keep only those 2 ideas for every one of them, if they play a sharp C, and if they're easy to blow. Everything else is game, right?
Yeah.
And I can have one that's slightly smaller, another one that plays the high notes with a big fat sound, another one that plays a low C super pianissimo. You know, it's a wonderful world. I am really a fanatic of what reeds can do. But even if I'm not a fanatic of actually having to sit down and make them all day, I don't do that. I make reeds when I need to, right? To learn how to make reeds, I tell my students to make 3 to 5 reeds a day and to keep a log. They're saying, oh, that reed was good, but it was too open and I didn't know what to do with it. And the next reed was too soft and I scraped that and it got worse. Now, just keep a log and learn. But once we learn, reed making is like a mathematical formula. Once you learn it, you just apply it.
Would you mind sharing a bit about your experiences with focal dystonia, your remarkable comeback story, and do you have any advice for oboists returning to playing coming off of an injury?
There's so much we don't know. And I will always have focal dystonia. I have come to grips with it, that it will be with me to my last days. All I do is cope. I find ways to cope by the stretches we do and exercises and so on. My recommendation for oboe players coming out of injuries is to be your own doctor, in a sense that you need to understand what is happening with you and where. What is the name of the tendon that is inflamed? What is the name of that muscle that is hard? Why is it that your hand doesn't turn that way? What is the muscle? What is the bone? Learn the anatomy. And also, if a doctor tells you, well, look, that looks like carpal tunnel syndrome, read about it. Read articles. We are in the age of information. In our pocket, we have a little device that we use for a lot of waste of time, but we can use that device to search for endless articles and YouTube videos. I use a lot of that. Reading books is good, but when we read a book on anatomy, at some point it's going to get so technical that it's no longer what we need. As patients, we need to understand what's happening to our body and be able to recognize, that little tick I just felt, that was my flexor muscle. So as I got out of the worst of focal dystonia, I keep my radar on to how my arm is working. And I can identify which muscle, which bone, which tendon is doing what that creates that effect. Either the negative that I have to avoid or the positive that I need to hang on to. So I discovered a lot of things about my back, and how we play the oboe with our arms up front. We put our head forward, and we become forward heavy, right?